10 a.m. to 11 a.m. on WSTX 97 a.m. Good morning. Welcome to Gun Violence Prevention Broadcast. I'm your host, Dexter Skeppel. I have two esteemed gentlemen here before me. Tony Manuel, the Executive Director, the leader of this push to reduce gun violence, and I have my co-worker and co-brother here, Hakeem Donadale. We're ready to talk gun violence and how and what we do. So I'm gonna have the boss start off and tell us a little bit what he does. So those of you who've joined us, never heard us before, don't know what we do, how we do it, and here we go.
Good morning, Dexter, and good morning to the listening audience. Tony Emanuel, the Executive Director of Gun Violence Prevention in the Territory. First of all, since I have the ear of the community, I certainly want to give my condolences to any families that have lost anyone recently. I know a couple of weeks ago it seemed like the bottom had fallen out, and we had this rash of shootings and injuries, and it just seemed to put us on our sides. And I'm really disappointed in people that still think violence is the way to solve their conflicts or their disappointments. We could talk forever about the mental capacity of people and how you control your own personal behavior and taking accountability for your actions. But I don't want to waste time on that. I'd rather talk about what are we doing to move forward, how are we getting past it, and what are we gonna do as a community to manage what we're doing. We recently had we had two events. We had the Peace and Paradise town halls. We had one in St. Thomas and one in St. Croix, and both had really good people come out. And I often say, it's like when I used to be a teacher, and we had the PTA meetings. You had the parents that are engaged in the school and their children come to PTA meetings. The parents that you needed to have there weren't there. And it's the same thing with the town hall. People come out. The people that come out are concerned about the community, concerned about the future of the community, concerned for the safety of their children and their families, and they come out. But we find ourselves preaching to the choir, and where we're all saying the same things in different manners. And so that was my experience at both events. A lot of, we should do this, we should do that, why aren't we doing this, why aren't we doing that? And then what was enlightening to me was also that clearly I'm not doing a well enough job. And when I say that, I'm saying that in conjunction with the conversation I had with Lieutenant Governor Roach. I asked him one time very casually, hey, if you had to give my office a grade, what would you give us? And he said, well, I'd give you probably a solid B. And I said, well, what would get me the A? And he said, well, you don't market enough. You don't tell the public what you're doing, so they don't understand exactly what you do. And I, having the conversations with the people from the other night, clearly he is correct that we don't spend a lot of time accolading ourselves over our successes. And I think maybe I certainly as a manager need to work on that, and our outreach coordinator probably needs to get better at sending stuff out and updating our Facebook page and saying what we're doing so that the public knows more, because we got a lot of requests and suggestions of things to do that we are already doing. After school programs, athletic programs, teaching conflict resolution in the schools, which there is a Title 18 rule that says that's supposed to be done according to Ms. Moorhead. I don't want to discount anything she says. She has some historical knowledge, and she always brings it up in any meeting she sees me. She brings it up that there is a that there's a Title 18 that says that conflict resolution should be taught in the school, and I would imagine that means to everybody at all the time. But we do it in more in pockets, other than the full school assemblies where we talk about anti-violence and anti-bullying. But I agree that there needs to be more intense and intentional trainings for our young people to deal with conflict resolution. And how we've done it so far has been on a need basis, based on what the counselors and the administrators from the individual schools have requested our assistance. Like, for instance, if they start to see a increase in fights or inappropriate touching in their schools, or young people are complaining about being sexually harassed or bullied, then they call us and they say, hey, can you do a presentation on anti-bullying? Can you do one on inappropriate touching or sexual harassment? And we pattern the presentation to the needs of that school based on what the principals and the staff are saying. So I think we're doing the best we can with the staff that I have, and I have an amazing staff, and I have assembled a team that is, this is a new adventure for us government-wise. We're the youngest agency created. We're the smallest agency created, but we're doing the biggest things. And I think that there's a lot to be said for that. I do want to say how much I appreciated the people that did come out and participate in our events, especially to the people that were kind of guided to speak, the chief of police, the representatives from education and health department, and even some of our candidates for potential offices were there, and they weighed in on the conversation. And so we appreciate their opinions as well. So I still think there's a lot of work to be done. We certainly, funding, one of the more common threads of suggestions that came out of the conversations were funding to organizations that are in this workspace, that are doing things for our youth and our community. Clearly funding has always been a problem. We're getting ready, we're in budget season now. And I was just looking at my budget today and trying to figure out what I can squeeze in for next year. So money always seems to be a problem. But sometimes we do the best with the less. And, that's my old Marine Corps motto. We do the best with the less, so we figure it out. But we shouldn't have to do that. And agencies that are out here doing the real work shouldn't have to be scraping and trying to find out where they're going to pay for water for kids in the camp, and, snacks for the kids that are on athletic teams, or transportation for vehicles, getting young people back and forth to different activities when the parents sometimes just can't afford to do it. Right. So those are all the social economic issues that surround how we can make our community better. And I have to echo what the chief of police said. When I say it every time, if you see something, say something, and use the Crime Stoppers anonymous number to call if you feel some anxiety about being a witness. I do appreciate, we had an incident last week, and there were witnesses on the scene that identified the shooter right away. So that helps. It helps the department. It helps the police department when they have to do the investigations, because they can get homicide investigations can be complicated if there's no witness ready to give up the person right away.
Hakeem Donadell, you're brand new to gun violence prevention. Introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about what are your thoughts about what you've seen so far.
Okay, Hakeem Donadell, Community Engagement Coordinator. I'm relatively new on the job. I am the neophyte, coming up on a year, probably about 7 months. I think the most important thing that I've noticed, and it's just from the 6 or 7 months of me gathering data, and really being on the front lines, because I go to the quote unquote projects. I go to the elementary, junior high, and the high schools. A lot of my background has been in the private sector, investments, right? I think as of late, within the past month, I didn't see how both areas fit in, but now I do. And I think that what I've gathered is that the most important investment is not our property, it's not stocks, it's not precious metals, it's our children. And I think, no, I know that in St. Croix, we've shirked that responsibility. And that's why we're beginning to see the cracks in the foundation. I was with Ruth King, who is the CEO of Women in Business, and she just had a seminar, Next Gen CEOs, where she's training young men and women on how to become entrepreneurs. And she began, that event by saying that she was speaking to a friend or a colleague or someone from another country, and they said, instead of saying, "How are you?" their introduction is, "How are your children? How are the children?" Because if the children are well, then the society will flourish. And when she said that, it just started percolating in my mind. And I kind of like connected that. That's when I began to really have a true connection between quote unquote Wall Street. I've been in Wall Street 20 plus years, 25 years. And, kind of like merging the two. All right. I think my natural talent, I've always had a talent with kids, with children, always. And now being in this place, in this position with gun violence prevention, now I'm truly seeing, my personality and where my true talents are at. But for me, leaning from 25, almost 30 years of experience, it's the investment. We don't look at our children as the most important investment. We may, we put a ton of money into gold, right? Everyone has a Gucci chain on St. Croix. Everyone has jewelry, right? Everyone has beautiful vehicles, even though, we have potholes. Well, can't say that. The governor has cleaned that up, gov. But we had potholes, but we have beautiful vehicles, beautiful homes, right? We make, it's important for us to make those investments, right? Clothing, let the carnival come. Everyone is tight on flight, everybody, right? But programs or over investing in programs for our youth is just few and far between. I remember on one of my attempts to come home years ago, probably about 20 years ago, Complex had a barber school. They had pretty much everything, barber, plumbing, but they had a reupholstering class. Okay. And I had left to go to New York probably for a couple of months, but my intent obviously was to come back home. And my goal was to go into that reupholstering class, because in New York City, you see furniture just thrown outside left and right, all right? And I'm like, wow, that could be a great business to just, get the bones of furniture and learn how to reupholster it, real fly. And I was very upset when I came back home and it wasn't, none of the classes were offered, right? So imagine, and this was, like I said, this was in 2007, maybe 2008. So, a while ago, right? 19 years ago, okay? Can you imagine in that time period, how many individuals would be reupholstering furniture right now? How many added barbers will we have? Listen, I'm still trying to get a great cut on St. Croix, right? We just don't invest in our kids. And I know that if we did a much better job of pouring into programs, and not in a competitive way. I think sometimes a program will start and it's like you're competing with the other basketball tournament, or you compete. No, we're all in one, right? And that's because we're all fighting for the same resources. So I think this has been the perfect combination of my experience as on Wall Street and my actual natural talent of interacting with children. I love kids. My stepmom had a daycare in New York, and I remember they would drive her crazy, and I would run the whole camp. I would run everything. You sit down. You're supposed to be doing your ABCs. I have a natural talent, and this is the first time that I've really been able to apply it. This has been one of the most fulfilling things I've done in my life, the past 7 or 8 months. And a lot of the children that I meet, their story is a lot like mine's. All right. My mom was a single mom, 25 years old. She actually was working for the police force at the time. She had 3 children, myself and my 2 sisters. And I remember her first check was $258. And that's every 2 weeks. So my mom had to take care of her 3 kids. And my dad wasn't helping out. Her ex-husband, my sister's dad, wasn't helping out. So she was by herself. And my mom was very frustrated. My mom would get upset. My mom would, immediately. Why? Because I didn't understand it until I became a parent, and I hit a tough time, when the markets weren't doing well. Trust me, life's not good. And to be concerned about feeding your child is the most stressful thing that you could possibly imagine. And I had to go through it. I had to hit a low point, and I'm like, wow, I only got enough food for this weekend. This is horrendous. How did this happen? And then I was able to understand what my mom was going through. And she wasn't a stockbroker. All I needed was one of my stocks to work out the next week, and I'm back on top again. But she didn't have that option. She had to try. And what's that? What, 250? What, $6,000 a year? Come on, that's some of our monthly household bills for some people, right? And that's what she made for a year. So now I'm able to look at the mothers of some of the children that are quote unquote acting up, right, in school, and I'm able to connect with them. I understand now. I get it. So if that young man's acting up, he probably doesn't have food. I know what it's like to open the fridge and there's nothing but condiments in there. It's nothing but onions staring at you, right? I know what that's like. I don't know how we got through it, but we did, right? And knock on wood, and definitely the Lord God. Myself and my 2 sisters, we got through it, and we've done well in life. Right. But we could have easily been a statistic. Maybe if I would have stayed home, I could have been a statistic, easily. So I'm able to see myself in them. I don't know if I was that frustrated or if I was that angry. I remember my times on St. Croix. It was glorious. I think that me growing up as a kid in St. Croix and in St. Thomas also were the best times of my life. When I went to New York, I was a little depressed, okay, because it's literally a concrete jungle. I used to have to go to Prospect Park just to see grass and green and trees. So I don't know how I was able to be so poor but so happy. I can't even. I don't even know what the answers are. I don't know how to answer that. But I can understand the young children that are disruptive in school. There's a frustration, and a lot of times our parents, when they're frustrated, they'll speak out in anger. They don't recognize that the kids are listening, and they're taking it literally. Okay, and they'll bring that anger to school. Then there may be abuse. There may be other things that are going on in the home. So, a lot of times when they say, what can we do for the kids? I'm like, well, maybe we need to do something for the mom. That is where ground zero is at. The issue is not the kid, all right? The issue is his environment and what mom's going through. And what a good portion of our kids probably live in a lot of the projects or the home, projects throughout the territory. And 9 times out of 10, that could be Section 8, that could be, they're on welfare, like we were. And we just don't understand the frustration that's at home.
Right.
So for us to want this kid to miraculously come out of a very stressful situation, and we're not blaming the parents. We understand things happen. Trust me, I understand it. But we can't expect these kids to just be miraculously happy for just because we were.
Right.
Our generation was, right? So my take from this past 7 months, right, is that we need to realign our minds and recognize that the single most important investment are our children.
Right. Going to the children, boss, what do you tell a mother that's listening today with a young man that is maybe not necessarily going in the right direction? What advice do you have? Because I listened to you counsel at Alfredo Andrews with one particular young man, and wow, I was just blown away with the depth.
He's me.
Yeah,
he's me.
Right.
That guy, that young man was me.
Wow. What do you say, boss? Is there anything from your experience as a Marine, a police officer, now executive director, and plus many other things that you've done? What advice do you give that mother that's listening, or that grandmother that's listening right now, saying, "Hey, what do I do now that my child is obviously pointing themselves in the wrong direction?"
Well, like Mr. Dondell says, it's an investment, and the investment starts early. As soon as they come out of that womb, we need to start investing in our children. And when I say "our," I mean for the mother,
right,
or the father, for that matter.
Okay.
And I think what we do as parents, sometimes we think our kids are okay, and we sort of give them this breath of space, and we're not really paying attention to them. Mm-hmm. And I think that the parenting that I'm seeing lately, even and I compare it to my own mother, mm-hmm, and how I parented my child. I think we need to pay attention to them as they're starting to develop, and when they're 3 or 4. What are they doing? What kind of, are they throwing tantrums? Are they manipulating parents to get what they want? And then as they're going through their academic careers, you need to really pay attention. And if you see your child is not performing well academically, that is probably the indication that there's something wrong. And then when they don't perform well academically, then typically those children become the school's discipline problems. Mm-hmm. They become disruptive to the classroom and then prevent learning from other people. Mm-hmm. Then they're disruptive, then they're frustrated, and then they lash out violently. They either become bullies, or they're very short-tempered. They get in fights, and then they have to be sent home.
Yep, seen it.
And so when they get sent home, then now they're out of the institution, but they're also risking their attendance and being held back, which adds more frustration, losing your friendships as their friends can continue to move forward. Then we lose touch with them. And sometimes parents they get the homework from the school, then they don't know what they're looking at, and so they get frustrated. And I think parents should, when you get homework and you're trying to help your child with the homework and you don't understand it, then go to the school. Go and say, "Hey, I'm trying to help my child with this homework, but I don't know how to do this new math you got going on." And I don't want to teach him or her tricks that I did when I was in school, because then it changes it confuses the child, the student. So I think when you don't know, go and ask for help. I mean, the Human Services and the Health Department have a lot of programs and resources to help students and to help your child regulate their their behavior, their emotions. Some, I think as a culture, we sort of think of therapy as a a scarlet letter or embarrassing or something you don't want to deal with. But I think we have to start to believe in the system and believe in how we can shape our young people by allowing them to be afforded these resources that help not only the parent and the child. So my answer is pay attention.
Okay.
Engage your children. Make sure that they are. I too often I see parents letting an iPad be the companion for this child. I was on an airplane a couple of weeks ago, and I saw the young lady sitting next to me with her child. She had a young son. I guess he was probably 3 or 4.
Okay.
But she had this coloring book, and he was coloring rather than doing something on a phone or a tablet. And so I told her I was proud to see her, and she was coloring too and making sure you try to stay within the lines, right? And I thought that those little things are the things that engage your child and start to teach them, how to handle a pencil, how to handle a crayon, how to manipulate and control what you're doing. Those small things, we got to realize those are stair steps to how we do stuff, how we learn. And if you skip those steps and go straight to a tablet or a pad, you rob the child of that experience. And there's also been studies that say that having a child engaged in too much time on screens is affecting their ability to learn. And that's pretty scary because all these kids are out here on these things. And the other thing that affects learning is the exposure to violence.
Wow.
Violence is one of the top 10 things of adverse childhood experiences. And you've been on the scene where a father shoots somebody in front of the child. And so that child is behind the 8 ball already.
Oh yeah, emotional.
And so now we need to deal with that and make sure that we are allowing that child to get all the resources available and monitor and make sure that they're not affected, or they're going to be affected, but how they deal with being affected. And clearly there is a desensitizing of the way we view violence in our world. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I think sometimes things are marketed to our population to create that divide within us. And if we're not paying attention, I think too many of us are asleep at the wheel.
Yeah.
Purchasing things that don't bring our communities any value.
That's true.
Taking on activities that hurt our community, dividing ourselves over things that we're never going to have control over, are just some of the benchmarks that unfortunately are the stereotype of how we operate with each other. And it's disappointing to see, it's disappointing to hear, whenever I hear that a young man was killed over a gold chain or shot because his girlfriend was with somebody else, or because you got mad because you got run off the road, or somebody raced you to the red light. And it's just, I get so frustrated, and I'm growing weary of the excuses of why we decide to hurt each other. And having been a policeman for 30 years and involved in law enforcement for 40, the last 15 as an administrator, I see that sometimes communities just don't seem to be getting better. And there's nothing one agency can do to make that happen. It has to be a collective effort not only from government agencies, but from community members, community organizations, faith groups, nonprofits, businesses. Everybody has to get on board and do their part. I mean, I have a saying that says, if you can complain about your neighborhood, but if you clean your own yard, cut your own grass, get that abandoned car out of your driveway, you maintain your own yard, then the others will follow suit. They'll say, wow, Mr. Manuel's yard looks nice now. Cut it. You got rid of the car. Then you do yours. Don't just complain about mine. Fix yours. And then I'll fix mine. And yeah, if you can lend a hand to get the other person's yard fixed, that's fine. But don't just complain about it. Go over there and help them cut their grass. So yeah. Which leads me to one theory that I need to kick out. This theory's been thrown around in community activism for years. It says that if you're in a neighborhood and there's a house that has a broken window and it's not tended to, then the people in that neighborhood think that the neighborhood nobody cares about the neighborhood. It's just like our housing communities. You drive through a housing community and you see trash all over the place and abandoned, burned out cars and tires. It looks like Hell's Kitchen. So you're like, this place sucks. And then the kids have to live in that. And so they think that they suck. And they think their lives aren't worth anything if they drive across the street at the beautiful condos and there's the manicured lawns and cut bushes and all this other stuff, then they feel like I can't amount to that. And that's where the frustration and anxiety comes in, and the envy and the anger of our young people.
As we close out today, we're way past our time here. Hakeem, Donadell, 30 seconds or less.
Well, our dear boss made a very interesting statement when he said marketing, and that goes back to that whole concept of life imitating art and how they've inverted where art is imitating, art imitates life. Now they've inverted it and it's life imitating art. If you remember, with the advent of crack, Scarface was the blueprint for all the potential drug dealers. I think that Shatas, that movie that came out about 20 years ago, has now become the art that we're all imitating. If you remember when we were kids, we had other things going on. So I think that's another issue.
Good. Thank you, gentlemen, for sharing this half an hour. Those of you who are listening for the first time, it's Gun Violence Prevention Broadcast right here at WSTX Radio. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time. Thanks again.